Order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Nancy,
She will be here shortly, I believe.
Sue,
Here.
John Havlet,
Here.
Kurt,
Here.
John Hogue,
Here.
Mark,
Here.
Cindy,
Can you hear okay, Cindy?
It's pretty fuzzy. I can hear you really well, and I can hear Sue, and then the rest is a little tougher.
Okay. All right. Okay, it's time for the voluntary Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, now we need approval of minutes, the regular meeting minutes of May 20th, 2013. Do you have a motion for that?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by, I believe, Member Haverlick and seconded by Member Flint to adopt the minutes of the regular meeting from May 20th, 2013. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, they're accepted. Is there any amendment, or are we going to get an approval for the meeting agenda today?
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve the agenda as stated.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's moved by Member Haverlick, seconded by Member Flint to approve today's meeting agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, that passes. Public hearings and bid awards. I see none on today's agenda, so we'll move to the next item, which is visitors' views related to the agenda. Is there any visitors with views related to today's agenda? Jared, would you like to? Yeah, we could go over your letter now instead of, it's under, it's actually under the next one. Next item, I believe. Nope, that's Perry. Yeah, go ahead.
Actually, I don't have the letter with me. I guess you closed on it, so we don't have the letter
we have to wait.
for that. So
For Glow, well, when Glow comes with the letter, we'll maybe start the discussion on that item and we'll move forward. So, visitors' views unrelated to the agenda. Barry Bracken has something you'd like to talk about?
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of the Assembly. For the record, my name is Barry Bracken. I'm a resident of the Petersburg Borough, and I reside at 705 Sandy Beach Road. And I'm going to go ahead and read this, just make sure that everything I want to say is in the record. Since returning to Alaska several weeks ago, I learned that earlier this spring, the Governor's Office adopted regulations that would allow state agencies to apply herbicides and pesticides on state property and rights-of-way without obtaining a permit from the Department of Environmental Conservation and without any public review. This denies our citizens the right to participate in the decision-making process regarding whether or not to protect our drinking water, our aquatic habitat, protect traditional food gathering areas from contamination, and to protect our pets and children from harmful, possible carcinogenic toxins. These regulations were adopted despite widespread public opposition across the state. The people of Alaska collectively own our public water supply and our fish and wildlife resources. We should have a voice regarding if and when there are any plans that might negatively impact those resources. The 30-day notification requirement prior to application that was adopted allows for no public input. This falls way short of providing the citizens a voice. Alaska markets our wild salmon to the world, touting our pristine waters. Applying toxic chemicals to the upland habitat would certainly make that a questionable claim. Spraying our uplands could negatively impact productivity of local salmon streams. Even the small tributaries are important fish rearing habitat. Also, many of the out-the-road residents rely on surface runoff and small streams for their drinking water. There is simply no way to protect against contamination. This is particularly true in our island rainforest ecosystem, where anything applied to the land is rapidly washed into the adjacent waterways and eventually into salt water by the rain. You may recall that several years ago, the Department of Transportation announced plans to spray herbicides to control plant growth along Mitkoff Highway. The people of Petersburg expressed strong opposition, and that program was stopped before it got started. Some were opposed to the visual impacts, but most, including myself, were more concerned that toxic residue would contaminate residential runoff-based water supplies and run into aquatic habitats and impact fish productivity. Those concerns have not changed. The Alaska Department of Transportation went back to mowing the roadsides, and although that method is more labor-intensive, it has kept the vegetation down and kept toxic chemicals out of the High Island's water supplies and waterways. I have talked to some of you individually about this issue. A big question seems to whether or not the borough has the authority to counteract this change of policy at the state level. I'm not a lawyer, thank goodness. Yeah, but Article 10 of the state constitution clearly provides broad powers to local governments. Home rule local governments enjoy even broader powers. Article 10, Section 11 of the Alaska Constitution provides that a home rule borough or city may exercise all legislative powers not prohibited by law or by charter. Adoption of a home rule charter promotes maximum local self-government to the greatest extent possible. The Alaska Supreme Court has interpreted the Constitution provision for a liberal construction of the power of local government as follows. The constitutional rule of liberal construction was intended to make explicit the framer's intention to overrule a common law rule of interpretation which requires a narrow reading of local government powers. In other words, you guys have control of most of anything that we do that is not clearly against state law. Given that language in the Constitution, it certainly seems that adopting an ordinance protecting our primary industry and the residents of the borough from toxic contamination should easily fall within our right of self-determination and self-government. I feel strongly it's the best interest of the citizens of our borough for the Assembly to adopt an ordinance that would protect our citizens and our waterways from large-scale application of pesticides and herbicides on any lands within the borough boundaries. To me, the best option would be to adopt an ordinance that totally bans any large-scale application of herbicides and pesticides within the borough. A fallback would be to at least require a public review process and approval by the Assembly before application of herbicides or pesticides could occur. I'm willing to work with the Assembly or the borough staff to help draft an ordinance ensuring that residents of the borough and the borough Assembly have a strong, clear voice in deciding whether or not poisons are applied to the lands within our borough. And I thank you for your time. Are there any questions?
Any questions of Mr. Bracken by the Assembly?
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Hope?
All right, Barry, you going to give up the citation of that case or not?
I can. Okay. I found this under Article 10 by Googling the Alaska State Constitution and the purpose and construction of the home rule government. And so just look at Article 10 of the state constitution. And the two sources that were actually quoted in terms of the Supreme Court ruling were Liberati versus Bristol Bay Borough, and the other one was Gilman versus Martin.
Could you spell those, please?
Gilman v. Martin, Martin.
And Liberati?
The first one.
Yeah.
Liberati, Liberati versus Bristol Bay Borough.
Thank you.
Are you done, Member Hope?
No, thank you.
Any other questions of Mr. Bracken? Can you, last time they were trying to spray herbicides on the highway, then the city complained and they didn't?
That's correct. As I understand it, Mr. Mayor, there were two communities that voiced opposition and had the program stopped, Haines and Petersburg, and apparently the others were a little bit. Now, I don't honestly know whether or not they went ahead and applied the herbicides in the other areas or not. But keep in mind this applies to both herbicides and pesticides, and so right now, according to the new policy, the Department of Transportation or the Alaska Railroad can apply herbicides and pesticides without public review, or by only giving a 30-day notice in the local newspaper.
That seemed
May I
kinda-
just
yeah.
ask a question? Barry, do you know offhand, it's DOT doing the spraying?
DOT would be doing the spraying here, and I have heard both ways. I've heard that they are intending to do that along the Midcock Highway, and right now they're mowing. They have been mowing for several.
There was also a, Donnie, I'm not sure who, the Forest Service under the RAC program was doing a big program on invasive weeds that weren't native, and I wasn't sure if that was tied into it at all. That's why
I
was
don't,
asking.
I mean, depending on how that is done. I mean, obviously, if you wanted to, and I'm assuming that would require a public review, because the policy, as I understand it, only applies to state agencies. But, yeah, that would be a good question. And, certainly when you craft an ordinance, you could have provisions, exclusions, whatever you wanted to do. And, certainly we don't want to get to the point where, I'm personally, for a lot of reasons, I think that Roundup is very, very harmful and shouldn't be sold by the 5-gallon jug in the local hardware stores. That's my personal opinion. I don't think you want to do anything that's going to prevent a gardener from spraying dandelion weeds, but I think that wholesale strip application of herbicides or pesticides could be very, very harmful to the aquatic environment, and I don't think it's in the best interest of the borough or its citizens.
Barry, it seems like we should send some kind of letter to the state too, and protest the way they're have just decided this without the public input, and for all the good reasons you have listed. And I mean, it'd be fine if we take care of our borough, but the whole state is
I understand.
the same deal.
But you have the authority, as I understand it,
Right.
to deal with the borough boundaries.
Right. Seems like we should do both.
Yeah, you should do both. I agree.
Yeah.
Member Havlicek?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we move ahead with an ordinance to prohibit spraying in our borough.
Okay, and then in conjunction with that, maybe we could have the manager draft a letter to the state, just maybe asking for more information, or however you want to proceed with that. Steve, does that sound like a good approach?
I'll second the motion.
Need your
Okay.
help.
It's been, motion's been made by Member Havlicek and seconded by Member Flint to draft an ordinance for the borough to be able to control herbicide and pesticide spraying in our borough. Is that how you worded it?
Yes.
Is that too
That's even better.
Is that too general, or do we want to be more specific?
Well, when we start drafting,
Besides, and Barry was saying he didn't want to encroach on,
the
private
state.
individual, so I'm just saying.
okay.
We if I may.
Yes.
So, can't pass an ordinance till it comes back before the assembly, so you'd have an opportunity to wordsmith it at that point in time.
Yeah.
As far as the letter goes, I was going to, if I may, Barry, could you write the letter literally for me? And I'll alter.
You're asking me to author it? Okay, I can.
That would be wonderful. And then we'll put it under borough letterhead and
Okay.
wordsmith it if need be. But just so we have the facts right, I don't want to assume that I do.
Okay, certainly.
Okay, so
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Barry. Is there any more discussion on the creation of this ordinance? Mr. Hogue?
Mr. Mayor, I've mentioned to Barry, who has talked to me about this somewhat, that my concern is a general rule of law, any political subdivision, which is the borough, cannot regulate what the state does, because the state is the basis for the borough's existence, so we need a legal review of that. I'm willing to take a look at the Constitution and the cases Barry has cited, but at some point I may suggest you want to get the borough's attorney to look at this.
Yeah, it's a good idea. I believe he's reviewing every ordinance as we redraft them to fit the borough.
Under the current process, we can't pass an ordinance that doesn't include the review by the borough attorney prior to
good.
the assembly voting on it. So,
I'll make certain that you do have the authority, but, like I say, I'm not a lawyer, but it appears that way to me.
Thank you, Mr. Bracken. Any more discussion on the
Just
formation
one
of the
comment,
ordinance?
it's disappointing that it came up again. We've already dealt with this before, got them to stop doing it here, and now with a different administration, they're changing their rules and want to come and spray again, and so maybe some teeth in it will help.
I think it's even more onerous this time around because at least in the past, there was a public review process and it was stopped during that review. Now there is no public review or no public recourse, and I think it's a lot more of a threat. And again, when I draft a letter, I'm going to be addressing the runoff water supplies, the fishing industry, and personal safety. So there'll be those three primary elements that we're looking at.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you, Mary. So I guess there's a motion on the floor. There's no more discussion, and the motion is to draft an ordinance to oppose, or be able to control, I guess, spraying of pesticides and herbicides on the borough property. So if there's no more discussion, will the clerk call the roll?
Mark,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
Sue,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Kurt,
Yes.
John Haverlick,
Yes.
John Hogue.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, it passes. Oh, just for the record, Member Strand is with us, so we have a full assembly. I think, looking at the agenda, Jared and Glow, I see that that's under communications, so I think we might just bring it up under that, because it might be a lengthy discussion. We should be able to go through this other business fairly quickly. So that brings us to board, commission, and committee reports. I see none. There's no consent agenda, and report of other officers. And there is a report by Member Lakadakis about the Cake Electrical Intertie and Cake Access Community Work Group. They had a meeting on May 23rd. So would you fill us in on that, Cindy?
Sure. Can you hear me clearly?
Yeah, I can. Can everybody in the audience hear? Yeah. Yeah, if you're clear.
We had a meeting, a public meeting in Assembly Chambers on the 23rd of May, and I apologize to those, although I think everybody figured it out. I had the wrong date on the messages I sent out, but we did have a fair number of people in attendance. The city manager and the mayor from the city of Cake participated. Nancy Barnes, the legislative aide for Jonathan Price Tompkins, called in. Bob Mills from Cape Tribal Corp also participated. We had presentations by Mike Trefalis of DOT and by Tom Parker of the Forest Service describing each of their projects and their time tracks. And we also had a number of borough and city of Kupreanof residents in attendance. We talked a little bit about what the projects were, what the time tracks were, what we hope to achieve. At this point, there was agreement by all parties on the need for the intertie. We agreed to keep lines of communication open. There was not consensus on intertie routes and road routes at this time between Cake, Kupreanof, and borough residents. But folks were interested in staying involved in the process. One of the things that is really important for people to understand is that the comment processes and the decision processes for the two projects are quite different. The Forest Service hopes to have a draft document available in September. At that time, the community will be able to read and comment on that project, and they will also be able to do that when a final document is issued. DOT, by virtue of congressional authority, is under a different review process. It's called MAP, M-A-P 21, the number 21, and you can look it up on the web. They will issue a draft document, and then when they issue a final decision, they will also issue their final document, and there will be no administrative appeal. So if communities want to, are not happy with the final decision for the Cake Access Road project, they will have to sue, and that is something that people need to be aware of. And so I would encourage folks to be involved in the process early on. The participants, even though we didn't come to any particular consensus, agreed that we would like to maybe get together in August. And I've had communication from community members who asked that they get a fair amount of lead time, especially for the people in Duncan Canal and some of the outlying areas. They don't always hear the radio and they can't always call in, so they need to be prepared ahead of time. And so we will do that to the best of our ability. And then Kate also asked if they could have copies of any resolutions that our communities had put forward on these projects, and the city clerk has pulled those together, and we will share them with CAKE, the various CAKE entities. So that's about what I have to say about that.
Thank you. Is there any questions of Member Lagoudakis by other Assembly members? I see none, Cindy, so thank you for that report. And now we'll move on to the Mayor's report. Item A is we're seeking letters of interest. The Borough is seeking letters of interest from persons interested in serving on the Ad hoc Sales Tax Ordinance Review Committee. The committee will review the Borough's current sales tax ordinance as it relates to changing commerce and economical needs in support of a wide variety of public community services and operations. After review, including receipt of public input, the committee will make recommendations for changes to the ordinance. Assembly members Strand and Flint have expressed interest in serving on the committee. So I would imagine we've advertised that in the paper and on the radio. Okay.
Yes.
One more week.
Okay, good. Item B, authorization to send a letter to Nathan Cullen. The letter requests support to facilitate transparent, open, and meaningful dialogue between the U.S. and Canada to create a well-structured and transparent ecosystem-based approach for assessing new development proposals in the BC-Alaska Transboundary Watershed region. And I read through the letter in length, and it has my signature on the bottom of it, and some of the things, of course I didn't draft the letter, some of the things I read in it kind of concerned me. It's a little bit, I don't know if harsh is the best word, but trying to get the Canadian government to listen. I think it's important that we maybe urge the state to fund a project to do a baseline water quality level assessment on all of our transboundary rivers, so we have something to go by. But this letter, I asked the city clerk to look into it this morning to see who drafted it, where it came from. The deputy or assistant city clerk, Debbie Thompson, and she didn't know, she couldn't find out where it came from. So she called Kathy over here, who's on vacation. She hasn't replied yet. So at this point, I would like to get more information about this letter before I sign it and send it off. If the Assembly's read it, if they feel different, then I guess they could make a motion for me to sign it and send it off, but that's how I personally feel about it. So I guess seeing no motions being made, I'm not going to sign the letter and send it off at this point. And Mike Bangs has given me a map that shows the mines and everything that they're planning on in Canada. It is pretty, it looks like it could be pretty invasive. It would be nice to have a some kind of dialogue with Canada and hopefully get some help with their management. Another thing under Mayor's report, I'm going to be heading fishing. I won't be here for the next meeting, and it might not be available to participate by phone until possibly, well, I don't know when I'll be able to participate by phone, but I won't be here in person until possibly September. So,
We'll carry on.
Yeah, and I think it should be pretty easy to take care of the business. I know it's going to be busy, but I will have, you'll be able to call me or contact me with any questions if you need any of my input, other than during the meeting time. I guess that's it for my report, and now we'll move to the manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our soon-to-be chief, Kelly Swihart, met with, kind of attended a meeting on behalf of both Petersburg and Hoonah with various Juneau legislators, Southeast Alaska police chiefs, and the chief of the U.S. Postal Inspection Service concerning ongoing cooperation. This meeting was held at the end of May in Juneau. This is related to some previous pressure that Petersburg started on trying to slow down or stop the flow of drugs through the post offices, and had some successes here in Petersburg, and we were asked to kind of share some of that, and the Postal Service supported the meeting and sent their folks as well. Congratulations to Captain Hamilton for completing a command college training program. In addition, he followed up on an outstanding felony investigation as part of the travel. It worked out really well for us. There's a proposal to hold the 2014 Southeast Region EMS Symposium in Petersburg. Sandy is working with them on the logistics to see if we can make that happen, bring some folks to town and show off a little bit. The annual Tyee maintenance outage started Tuesday, May 28th. Should be complete in the next day or so. It ran a little bit long this weekend. They found some things they wanted to work on. So maybe by tomorrow afternoon, but definitely within the next couple of days it should be finished. Thanks to Power and Light, they provided some expertise and staff to help PFI take oil samples from their large transformers. One of these kind of things that gets unheralded sometimes, and they did a great job. Not part of normally what we do, but they went over and helped PFI take the samples so that it would satisfy an insurance requirement. Just wanted to thank them for that. We're expecting the 65% drawings and review of the drive-down dock and crane dock is due June 6th, unless that's changed. Okay. Harbor staff is continuing to work with P&D on preparations for the North Harbor reconstruction and the core dredge process. Should see the old floats being removed August 1st is when they start working on that. So, Pump Station 5 site has been cleared, mostly cleared of trees, and our employees did that. If you remember, the budget on that was a little tight, so we had our own folks go out there and do that to cut down some of the cost. Rock and Road should be mobilizing the site and beginning work on that shortly. Congratulations to Blake and our water wastewater department. Our employees we sent to a 2-day class in Anchorage on pumps and pump systems. Cost of the class was $2,000, including travel. Helps us be able to take care of our pumps more in-house rather than having to always send them out. Plus what we need to do to keep them to last longer. Water treatment plant upgrades appear to be completed. I think we're working through some of the punch list items right now. This was really important. We were worried early on whether that could get done in time for the summer processing. It appears that will all be done. Sanitation group is currently working towards a test period for doing commingled recycling. It's a trial that'll run from June 5th to July 10th. This is just specific people in certain areas just to test it out so we can learn what does it cost us, how does the process work, and if it does really, really well, from that, the hope is that we have a economical way to roll this out to everyone. Classes from the elementary school got, as well as the assembly and some department heads, got a sneak preview of the new library. The elementary school was over there on May 20th and 21st, and we did some tours this morning. A member of the library staff attended the Alaska Native Libraries, Archives, and Museums Conference in Anchorage on May 27th through the 31st. All the travel and costs and wages are paid with grant funds. Estimated cost or value to the borough was about $1,200. Gun range improvements were awarded to Reed Brothers Construction. Chris Cotta is working on getting that contract executed and moving forward with the project. This is important. We had 2 different legislative grants out there that we needed to move on, and that project seems to be, again, getting to the point where we're actually working on it. Summer camp at Parks and Rec began today, I believe. We're in for 8 weeks. Flower baskets downtown, for those of you who have been asking, we are putting them up. We're trying to work around the construction. We don't want to put them on a pole that's going to be removed, so we have to put them up, take them down, put them back. So it's kind of going to be a little bit spotty this year based on the construction schedule as we work around them. And just wanted to thanks to Jesse and Robert in Parks and Rec for their work at the cemetery for Memorial Day weekend. We had some equipment problems. They were able to work around that and basically mowed the cemetery by hand and got it in great shape for the very important weekend from a cemetery perspective. That's it, unless there's questions.
Thank you. Any questions of the manager about his report today? No? Thank you, Steve. That brings us to unfinished business. First item under unfinished business is ordinance 2013-7, an ordinance providing for chapter 3.12 of the municipal code entitled Administration, updating current language. adding a section that informs how employees will be compensated, and applying the provision of the ordinance on an area-wide basis. This is the third and final reading. The ordinance provides for the means of the borough's goal to attract and retain skilled employees. At the May 20th Assembly meeting, the ordinance was amended to include 3 additional communities to be used in determining employee wages. Entertain a motion to adopt 2013-7 in its third and final reading.
Mr. Ma-
Is there a second?
A second?
Okay, it's been moved by Member Walhitter, seconded by Member Hoag to adopt ordinance 2013-7 in its third and final reading. Discussion? Cindy, you wanted to talk on this?
I do want to talk on this, and I want to reiterate some of the points that I mentioned last time and add some new information. I do believe that this ordinance was crafted with the best of intentions. However, it does not meet its stated goal, and it is not a meaningful ordinance. And I think when we pass law, it needs to be meaningful and measurable. This is policy, not law. Member Hoag stated that the desire for transparency was the motivator for putting this ordinance into place. However, employees don't receive a copy of the city code at hiring. They do receive an employee handbook where this information would be more logically placed. To pass this ordinance ties us to certain communities for comparison, rather than allowing for flexibility needed when communities grow or shrink and their economies change. Ordinances need to have a standard by which they can be assessed of their success or failure. This really has none, and it includes language which is not well defined. It sets an awkward precedence, and it does not solve anything. I doubt it would stand up to any legal challenge, and our borough attorney has raised some questions about it as well. In terms of solving an issue, it is not solving an issue. The employees are not asking for this ordinance, and in fact, a number of them have approached me and have concerns that it become an ordinance rather than a policy. So in my mind, it does not resolve anything, and I would urge you to vote no.
Okay, thank you. Sue?
I have a question for Cindy on that. Are you talking about the whole ordinance, Cindy, or just that one edition of 3.12.030?
Thank you for that clarification, and that is just that one section.
Okay. Well, I happen to agree with you wholeheartedly, and I think even last meeting's motion that we had to add 3 more communities shows how cumbersome this is. And then are we telling future assemblies that, gee, if you look at Kodiak, you're breaking this law here because Kodiak isn't in this list of all these Alaska towns that we're saying we have to check compensation with. To me, we need to X that and then move on. And I guess I would make that a motion.
To remove section 3.12.030 from the ordinance?
Yes.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved by Member Flint and seconded by Member Strand to remove section 3.12.030 from this ordinance, which is ordinance 213-7. Discussion on the amendment. Okay, seeing no discussion, will the clerk call the roll on the amendment to remove section 312.030 from the ordinance?
Kurt,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes means we're removing it, right?
Correct.
correct.
Yes.
Sue,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
John Hoag,
No.
Mark,
Yes.
John Haverlick.
No.
Okay, it passes 5-2. So now we are back to discussion on the ordinance as amended. Any more discussion on it?
I have a question. Does this mean we still are in third reading of this, or do we have to go back to first reading?
We're in third reading, I would believe. Third reading is amended, or what do you think?
I believe it's third reading as amended.
Okay. Seeing no discussion, will the clerk call the roll?
Kurt,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
John Haverlick,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
Sue,
Yes.
John Hogue.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, the ordinance 2013-7 passes in the third and final reading. Now that brings us to, under old business, to ordinance 2013-8, an ordinance adopting the budget and setting the millage rates for the fiscal year July 1st, 2013 through June 30th, 2014. Final reading. The budget ordinance was amended at the May 20th Assembly meeting to reflect changes made during the annual property tax appeals process. The budget provides for a total expense of $56,682,799 and a total mill levy of 11.14. Is there a motion to adopt this ordinance in its third and final reading?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Member Havlicek, seconded by Member Flint to adopt ordinance 2013-8 in its third and final reading. Any discussion?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
As I mentioned last time, I still think we should have made some cuts in this budget, but I realize that's too late. But what I'd like to propose, and I'll put as a motion for our next meeting, is if we can look at capping our mill rate at 10. And I think this would be sending a message to property owners and business alike that we're fiscally responsible, and we're looking at, offering a consistency to, down the road. Yeah, it's not for this time, but I would like us to consider that next time. Thank you.
So was that a formal motion?
No.
Or do you just want to have it on next meeting's agenda to
Yes, sir.
discuss it?
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yes.
Jody, help me out if I mess up the language here. Actually, our mill rate is capped at 10.
The total mill.
Total, okay, so you're saying not counting,
Bonds.
including bonds, you want
Yes,
it capped at 10?
that's
I just
correct.
wanted to specify.
Okay, is that it?
Yes.
Okay, so any more discussion on ordinance 2013-8? Will clerk call the roll?
Nancy,
Yes.
Sue,
Yes.
John Haverlick,
No.
Kurt,
Yes.
John Hogue,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Cindy.
Yes.
Thank
Okay,
you.
ordinance 2013-8 passes 6-1 with member Havlicek in opposition. And now that brings us to item C, Juneau appeal of Petersburg Borough boundaries. The borough's appellee, I think that's how you say that, brief was submitted on Friday, May 31st in response to Juneau's appeal. We've got a copy of it today, presented to us at the meeting, so if the person wants to read it, you have it.
Actually, Mr. Mayor, we just got the Appleby's brief. We didn't have Petersburg's brief, did we?
Is that Petersburg, that is a copy of
This is-
Petersburg's response.
I'm sorry. Yeah, if I may. Yeah, this is a copy of our attorney's response to Juneau's
Okay.
brief. I believe the next step is Juneau then has an opportunity to respond to
this.
this.
May I suggest in the future that we don't copy 50 pages for everybody? Electronically might have been sufficient.
Okay, thank you.
We're working towards that.
And now, item D under unfinished business is redistricting. On May 30th, 2013, the Alaska Superior Court issued an order that requires public hearings on the revised redistricting plan and instructs the redistricting board to begin expeditious preparation of the new plan. And they weren't very nice to the redistricting board when they gave them their directions, and I'm glad that's how they did it. Hopefully the redistricting board moves forward. Anyway, I think we all have copies of that document as well if you want some more good reading. That brings us to item 14, new business. Item A, authorization to amend professional services agreement, landfill slope stabilization project. Public Works Director Hagerman is recommending that P&D Engineers professional service agreement for the landfill slope stabilization project be amended to include the contract administration and construction inspection for an amount not to exceed $49,220. Entertain a motion.
I so move.
Second.
It's been moved by Member Strand, seconded by Member Flint to approve this amendment to for $49,220 to be paid to P&D for slope stabilization. Discussion? So, Carl, was this is in addition because of more hours, or what?
We had a current contract with P&D for design of the project, but we didn't have a contract for inspection of the project, so this handles that part of the project.
Okay, so they'll watch it be transported and put on the...
Right. We have a design that's approved by DEC. We need to make sure that that design is upheld, and they'll make sure that that happens for us.
Okay, thanks. That clarifies it for me. Any more discussion or questions of Carl? Will the clerk call the roll?
Cindy,
Yes.
John Ho,
Yes.
John Haverlet,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Kurt,
Yes.
Sue.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, it passes unanimously. Item B under new business, acknowledgement of certified 2013 real property tax roll. The assessment process for 2013 has concluded. Assessor Mike Renfro has certified the total assessed value for the 2013 tax year at $294,744,900. So, do we need a motion to approve that, accept that? I would entertain just information. Okay,
I
thanks.
have one question on that.
Okay.
What is the exemption?
I'm trying to get there.
Citizens exemption?
Last page in the packet.
Okay, all that stuff, okay.
My question is for Jody, I think. When he says less exemptions, 30,873,000, does that include the 150,000 that all the seniors are exempted?
Yes, that's mainly what that is.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
That's interesting info.
Can I
Okay.
have a
Yes.
question? This is for my own clarification. This amount, $294,744,900, is how is the amount the state uses to determine our contributions from them for schools?
No.
No.
Sure.
If I may?
Steve,
Actually,
explain.
correct. The answer is no. The state assessor includes a estimated personal property tax in addition on top of that we do not levy, and then factors in the school mandatory contribution. So, yeah, and I'm not sure how they come up with that estimate.
Did that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion on item B under new business? Okay, seeing none. Communications. Under communications, there's a letter from National Marine Fisheries Service NOAA Officer Jared Cook concerning fish cleaning stations and local sea lion issues. So Jared, would you like to talk to this or go? I mean, since this concern has been presented to the harbor staff, or the letter was given to them, this is the first time I've seen the letter. The harbor removed all of the fish cleaning trays out of the harbor, and then they put a couple of them back that seemed that were maybe in a less dangerous area or something, but I know it's going to be an issue with potential ticketing of people feeding sea lions in our waters. Is that?
Mayor and Assembly, this
Can you state your name, please?
Jared Cook, Enforcement Officer with National Marine Fisheries Service. The letter is not necessarily from me, it is from the head of NOAA in Alaska, and it's signed by Doug Meekum, who is his second. Referring to the sea lion issues that have developed in the harbor and have been ongoing for a number of years, it tends to be each year when you start the spring and the summer season, the sea lions get aggressive down there. They come in, they've gotten used to feeding in the harbor and coming to the harbor for their food supply. Each year we get complaints about it, we work our way through them, and they kind of taper off late in the summer. But we've failed to address the problem and try to correct it. And based off of complaints we got this year of sea lions charging people on the dock, trying to take their fish away from them while they're cleaning them, and just the aggressive nature of the sea lions, I was directed to take a little more of an aggressive approach on the enforcement of the feeding that's going on around there. I met with Glow last week, the harbor master, to discuss the situation, and what I would like to do is work cooperatively with the harbor department and the user groups of the harbor for this season to try to change the overall practice of dumping in the harbor and try to get those sea lions to go elsewhere for their food. My intentions is to try that approach rather than the ticket folks that are down there cleaning their fish. I would much rather try to fix the problem than run around writing tickets. And so I don't know what the harbors and the city's plan would be to try to change that, but I'm willing to work with them in any way I can to make it to where the sea lions are not being drawn there by the fish waste that's being dumped in the harbor.
So, any questions of Jared? I have one if no one else.
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
The crab carcasses, same issue or different?
The way I would be looking at it is if the product is being dumped in the harbor and I see him eating it, that would be considered feeding. I really couldn't tell you if I've seen one eating crab or not. But I really hate to get in the process of where we're having to define one product from another and what he does eat and what he doesn't eat. I think we'd be opening the door up for people trying to make a decision on, oh, he's not going to eat this and we're going to throw it in. I think the answer is that we start dumping our waste products somewhere else.
Okay.
John?
I think this is a good idea, and the big guy's gotten really aggressive, the big sea lion. I was cleaning 2 years ago and just taking the cheeks out of a halibut, and it came right out of the water up to the table and pulled the carcass out. And good thing I was uglier than it, because the sea lion kept going with the halibut, but it was about a foot from my face. And today I just saw a little child by the cleaning table. I was going, what if it just makes a mistake? I guess I'm getting paranoid in my old age, but that's a real wake-up call.
Well, these things are very much like having a bear in the water. I mean, they're the same size, the same temperament and stuff.
Same jaw.
And one of the fears is that someone's going to get hurt. People have gotten bit by them in the past in this community. And I would rather take a proactive approach before something like that happens again than to wait until it does. Very much like the dump and some of the other places around here where things are left, my other concern is where the liability falls when those people dump their garbage or waste material, who then becomes liable when it comes for cleanup and accidents that happen there because of it. And that could be argued on many different sides as to who's liable at that point if someone does get hurt there, and so I would take that into consideration too.
Okay, Member Aldrich, you have another question?
I should have asked this wise. Do you see that we can safely keep cleaning tables on the dock?
I don't know.
In other areas of the, I'm sure this isn't unique to us. In other areas, how are they handling this?
In Sitka, they have cleaning stations anchored out away from the harbor itself, where they clean the fish, and then they're required to take the carcasses from there out past the runway to dump them. That has taken the sea lion problem out of the harbor and displaced it to the cleaning stations out away from the harbor. And my understanding now is they're even out past the runway. They're trying to implement a plan where they dump on the go, because the sea lions are moving out there and finding places to get the food.
But I'm wondering, since you mentioned it's a liability issue.
Well, my concern is that it could possibly become, if we continue to dump in the harbor, who's taking ownership of that pile of stuff underwater that the sea lion's feeding on? And in Yakutat, they have cages that are sea lion proof, that the tables, the people put it on, down the chute, it goes into this cage. When that gets full, they tow it out to deep water and dump it. So each community has come up with their own unique way of dealing with the problem, but each community has had to deal with this problem in one form or another.
Okay, any more questions of Officer Cook? Thanks, Jared. Gord, do you have anything you'd like to say? I know there's an issue for the harbor.
Yeah, it's been a major issue for the harbor for quite a considerable time. I want to say that I think we have much more of an issue than any other place in Alaska. You know, just talking to other harbor masters, you know, we have quite a population that nobody else seems to have for a variety of reasons. And I don't know, you know, after visiting with Jared and talking about the liability issue and just this particular very aggressive sea lion this year, that's kind of where I went with the, you know, just grabbing everybody's attention and pulling the stations out just to make everybody realize that there is we're having a real issue. I mean, down there with all these little kids, summertime's on, now we're going to be herring fishing off the end of the Kestrel, and I've had that sea lion out there on the dock. So I'm pretty nervous about what we end up doing. I've talked to numerous people, a lot of them are in attendance today, and talked to some of the local businesses that are down there at the launch ramp, and everybody's scratching their heads, you know. I mean, if we have a collection site, there's lots of issues that go along with that. It's almost that to the point that we would have to, you know, babysit it, and it might require an employee. You know, it's not an easy fix, and so a lot of communities have done a lot of different things. And so we got this letter, and I'm talking with Jared. I wanted to bring it to your attention. It'll be at the next Harbor Board meeting. We'll talk about it, see if there's some kind of even language we can put into the code. Right now, we don't have anything that talks about disposal. The fear I have is if we don't have cleaning stations, pretty soon it'll go back to the old days where you got a guy with 15 cohos out on the main float that's now holding up traffic next to the water spigot. I mean, that's why we put the fish cleaning stations in at first, just to kind of concentrate it, get it out of the major traffic area. So a lot of, you know, there's a lot of elements of this that we have to consider. Many of the issues we'll have are with our local hometown people. It's not necessarily the charter fleet. They have a good system worked out. They have the, you know, the way they do it is it doesn't really affect the harbor so much. So it's mostly the hometown crowd. You know, it's the guy out there once or twice a year doing a subsistence halibut trip, comes in with 4 or 5 halibut. What's he supposed to do? You know, maybe has a seal a meal at home, isn't going to run it through one of our local vendors. You know, does it once or twice a year, but you compound that with everybody in our community that has a halibut systems permit, pretty much it's a daily thing. So there's a lot of, you know, how do you pass on costs to have of an employee sitting down there to those people that all we get them for is a launch permit, and they're in a 16-foot skiff. So, you know, Sitka is grandfathered in with this station that they put in 86. Today, I'm not so sure that we're allowed to do that because Fish and Game has to go down and do their census and their checking of the fish. So I don't know that we could drive pilings and put an old section of the North Harbor out in Scow Bay and transfer the problem down there. It's not that easy. So we're working through it. We're talking. It's going to be at the Harbor Board and probably at some point be back to you guys to make some hard decisions.
So in the meantime, the cleaning stations, at least some of them are back in the harbor, and
yeah, and if you want me to pull them out because of this liability issue, I don't know. What do you know? We're kind of between a rock and a hard place. We have one. I put one back in at the the launch ramp, and we do have one out at the end of the Middle Harbor because there's a pretty good current out there. We don't seem to have a place for the sea lions to really, they kind of hit and miss out there. So we do have two, but, you know, do you feel like we're out hanging ourselves out on a limb here, or how do you want me to handle it? Do you want me to put them back in and just put signage out there that says, you know, don't dump your waste, we are asking you to haul it out? We don't have anything in the code that specifies that there is no dumping in the harbor.
Any suggestions from the assembly members? Mr. Havlik?
Mr. Mayor, I would like to see us getting, because of the liability issue, taking the tables out and putting signage saying that you can't clean your fish in the harbor. But the thing I'm wondering about, and I don't know if I'm remembering this right or not, that you can't clean your fish on the boat. Isn't there a ruling against that also?
Yeah. Well, we have a couple of professionals here that could tell you a little bit more.
Doug,
maybe.
can you talk to the rules and regulations a little bit about what you have to do with sports caught fish, or talk to, see Stan Malcolm in the audience, we talked about it a little bit at coffee every morning, and it's can you come to the microphone, please? And,
sure.
Thanks.
I'm Doug Fleming with the Department of Fish and Game here in Petersburg, the Sport Fish Division. A lot of our species that come in we have annually have news releases, EOs, that require people to bring their fish in so they can be sampled for our management. This would include for king salmon, includes for rockfish, includes for halibut. A lot of these, this is not our management, but our creel people collect the information on sport cod halibut and all the other species, and also the other important information that's collected through the creel program is also genetic sampling, which is being used more and more with management, and then also we are still looking for coated wire tags with coho and with Chinook salmon. So in a lot of these cases where there's length-based regulations for fish like king salmon, or even with halibut, we need to have fish brought in so they can be measured. A lot of the halibut regulation that comes down on the sport charter fleet comes through our sampling at the docks of average size of halibut taken in by the charter fleet in Petersburg, and those will get factored in. And so, yeah, it is an important factor. This is done all over Southeast Alaska. Most ports, they all have, we have heading and filleting, requirements that people bring in their fish so that our port samplers, in this case creel, can sample those fish.
Any questions of Mr. Fleming? I know it's a pretty touchy issue. I mean, forever people have brought their fish into the harbor and cleaned them and, threw the waste overboard and went home. So to not allow that, it's going to be, I understand the liability part of it too, but to not allow it's going to make it, we have to come up with some kind of a solution if there is one that's workable, I think. So, Mr. Hogue?
Question for those of us that are just sports fisher, and we can quarter the halibut out on the ocean, as I understand it, as long as we bring it in the quarters. Is that correct?
That would be still halibut are federally managed, so Fish and Game does not manage halibut regulations. That would be under federal. Mr. Cook could probably better answer that. There's some differences in how Fish and Game regulations apply to things versus federal management.
So your regulations do not apply to sport cod halibut?
No, we would typically in our regulation summaries as for convenience we list what the sport halibut regulations are for unguided sport, but we don't.
And for salmon, as long as they can be cleaned out, as long as they're not filleted. Is that correct?
Mr. Hogue, we still require the head stay on the halibut, or excuse me, on the salmon, because we're looking for coated wire tags.
Right.
Okay. So that is one of the things. So yes, an angler can certainly, gut and gill a fish at sea, which that can reduce some waste. But anyway.
Okay. And for crabs, is my understanding, though, they have to come into the harbor hole.
Mr. Hoag, yes, that's correct. Crab do have to come in because there are certain, they have to be able to be known that they're male and of legal
Length.
size.
Yep. Okay.
So,
Thank you.
yes.
How long has that been a regulation on the crab? So you have to bring them in with the shell on, because I might end up perjuring myself here, but for years, people go out,
You make
without
a lot of
mentioning
code
any
offense.
names, go out and bring a crab cooker with them, and they go cook their crab, and if they're out for 2-3 days, they just bring their legal number home cooked. So they have to keep them alive for 2-3 days instead then, I guess, is how the...
I don't, Mayor Jensen, I don't think there's a prohibition for people that are out on boats to go and have a picnic or whatever, or eat their crab. But if they're coming back into port, they have to, we can't obviously have trooper protection in every bay and cove, and I don't think people are expected that they can't touch any other seafood until they return to port.
So all crab that are brought to town have to be whole?
Yes, so that they can be determined. But I don't know what year that regulation, it probably predates my being here by a considerable margin.
Interesting. Thanks. Any other questions of Mr. Fleming? Okay, thanks, Doug.
Welcome.
Anyone else want to comment on it? Stan?
Mr. Mayor, Assembly members, my name is Stan Malcolm. I'm president of the Charter Boat Association here. We passed this information on to our group last week when we were first made aware of it. We don't have a huge concern with the disposing or the non-disposing of waste in the harbor for the charter fleet. However, from the residents' perspective, it's going to be a bigger issue for them and the non-guided fleet, the people that rent skiffs, stay in the hotels, do that kind of thing. It's going to be a bigger issue for them. Removing the fish cleaning tables, while at first glance seems like a quick fix, unless you also outlaw cleaning fish or filleting fish on the dock, and maybe even offloading fish onto the dock, you may in fact make the liability worse by now putting people on their hands and knees on the dock filleting halibut where they're nose to nose with the sea lion rather than up on the table. So it's a complicated issue. We've been talking to GLOW. Hopefully somebody will come up with a good idea to solve this, but just think about all the aspects before you jump.
I'm glad you came, and it's going to be a community-wide discussion. Hopefully people will get involved. Jared, do you have another?
If I had to, he brings up a good point there. I would much rather have the people standing at the cleaning station than sitting on their hands and knees on that dock. My goal here is to work with the user groups, work with the city, work with the harbor through this season to try to take care of this problem. And so if we can take a proactive approach on this and try to take care of it this season, that would be my main goal. Because the sea lions are a protected species, we just can't off the guy because he'll just be replaced by another one within days. And that's been the norm when they have taken an animal out of the harbor because he was over aggressive. It didn't take long for another one to take his place here, and it doesn't do any good to remove the animal if we're not going to take care of and try to fix the problem that's bringing them in here. So that isn't the right answer. It's not saying that this animal may not have to be taken if he continues to be aggressive and we stopped the process. I suspect that he would probably get very aggressive for a while before he moved on, and getting through that time period might be challenging, and may very well come to a point of having to take that animal. But understand that going through that process is a long process in and of itself. So we got to try to fix the problem that's drawing him in here before we take that route, because he'll just be replaced within days. There's a huge amount of them around. It's usually the dominant bull that is sitting at the cleaning stations, and he'll just be replaced quickly. So that's kind of where I'm at now, is let's fix the problem before we have to take that other step, or even talk about taking that other step.
Thank you. Any questions of Officer Cook? Member Flint?
I'm not of Officer Cook, especially maybe of Glow. Do we have warning signs down there? I can't recall. We do.
Yeah, we have actually, Jared supplied us for many years with the official federal regulations hanging right beside the fish cleaning stations. I put out alerts that said, you know, please work with us and don't dump your waste. You know, but the thing that I'm nervous about is that intern he's talking about, intern time, and so really appreciate somebody I could blame it on, or pretty clear direction on, do you want me to keep the stations in, or do you want me to take them out?
Mr. Mayor?
How does Mr. Hoag?
Is there a way to, I recognize somebody's going to have to pay for this, which we could deal with, but is there a way to use those big commercial plastic tubs with stations, so instead of the chute going into the harbor, it goes into a tub?
Well, we've talked about that, and actually I went over and talked to Greg Einerson about it, and you know, it's the feasibility of moving something like that. He has a kind of an operation. He's concerned about the weight of something like that, you know, trying to get a human being to push that up if it's three-quarters of the way full. So we're looking at, well, maybe shrimp boxes, but then you got to rely on people to keep the darn cover on it. And what do you do after 5 o'clock? Most of the people are coming in after 5, and so pretty soon you end up with this oozing mess that's going to attract not only the sea lion, but every other thing. There's a lot of logistics.
So maybe the Harbor Board could look at some solution that would include also figuring out a way to charge for that to recoup costs.
Yeah,
because people are going to, if you leave the stations there with that chute, they're going to, I mean, they're going to be used and they're going to go into the harbor. And if you don't,
yeah, you relocate the station to the middle of the float, you know, maybe the sea lion has to jump that much further, which he'll do after 5 o'clock, because I got 30 of them kicking around. I mean, you know, pretty soon you have a bloody mess that is the entire float now, you know, because yeah, you can ask people to clean up, but you know how that works. And so yeah, it'd be hiring somebody full-time to sit and monitor this, or contract it out, you know. And I don't know who you'd pass the costs on to, because like Stan said, they've got a pretty good system figured out, you know. Yeah, I just, you know, it's quality of life issue too. I don't.
What was the manager's? I'm sure you've been thinking about this, Steve, for over a week. I mean, if you
trying to, you know, Bill and I went through some of the numbers, and you know, we're not budgeted, and we talked about a grinding station. I mean, they're $50,000, not counting the stuff around it, and you got to have somebody down there, you know, more than 8 hours a day. So that's not currently in the budget. You know, I like the idea of removing some of the cleaning stations, you know, and seeing if it, you know, buys us some time to come up with a better solution. You know, particularly if we can locate cleaning stations away from where this big aggressive male is at the moment, realizing that he'll change directions and go elsewhere. But you know, to me, that seems like a good compromise until we can allow the Harbor Board and some of the experts in this room maybe to weigh in and come up with a long-term solution. We don't have one right now. I mean, and I think removing all of the stations is a pretty big hit to the community for a lot of the reasons everyone's been talking about. You know, limiting the exposure, put a lot of signs up right now. You know, if we have to ask law enforcement and harbor folks to wander through that area occasionally a little more often, we can do that short term. Again, giving us some time to maybe think of a better solution.
Sue?
I was curious what the charter boat solution is.
Well,
Stan, could you please go to the microphone so people that are listening, if anybody's listening, sorry. Just protocol.
You clean out on the, when you catch them, or?
Mr. Mayor, Sue, or Mr. Flint, we bring our fish in. Most of the charter guys that bring halibut in, we do gut them on the dock, and we have been throwing the guts overboard. It's not a big issue for us to take those guts in a 5-gallon bucket and take them back out the next day because we're fishing on a pretty much a daily basis. The rest of the carcass goes to coastal cold storage. Head, carcass, they do the filleting, they dispose of the waste. We don't do it. Very few of the charter guys do any filleting on the tables anymore, and if they do it, it's usually when it's a fairly small single fish or something a client wants for dinner or something like that. So it's not a big deal for us. But we are required to offload the halibut onto the dock for creel census to check, measure and look at our salmon. Our salmon are dressed at sea, so we don't deal with those on the dock, and they go head on up to coastal as well. So it's not a huge issue for the charter boats.
And also to follow up with that, the coastal then can pass those costs on because they don't dump it for free. No. They go take it across to Trident, and they're billed per pound of that waste, which they're able to pass on to Stan's client, and it gets paid for that way. Whereas if all of a sudden I asked Kurt, I asked Greg what's kind of a number, and he said, well, kind of in the summertime he shoots for about 150,000 pounds of fish. Well, you start, 26% of a salmon is the head and the tail, and so then you start, wow, that could be, from him alone, you're talking 30,000, 40,000 pounds possibly of waste. Just that's a lot of, all of a sudden we're having to pass that cost on to somebody to run it through Trident's grinder, through somebody else. What they do in Sitka, they issue for 40,000, they have somebody babysit their station and take their carcasses and guts out to sea. Like Jared said, they do it on the fly. This guy will come through on a regular basis multiple times a day and pick up what's there in their catch basin, and he will run it out past the airport and do it not in one dump, but now do it deck bucket by deck bucket all day long. That's how they're handling it.
Stan, any suggestions on this?
Nothing I haven't already discussed with Glow. There's some modifications can be made to the fish cleaning tables to help get the word to people. You can close those holes up, cut the chutes off so they're not inclined to shoot that stuff down off the table. You could possibly wall in the sides of the fish cleaning table and so you got a place for a bucket or something underneath it to put your stuff while you're doing it, that the sea lions couldn't actually see it. But it's complicated. If you have buckets or totes under there, you got to drain them, otherwise they're going to fill up with water and gurry, and so you've got to drain the gurry, and then you've got the mess with the flies and the birds and the smell, and so it's a bit of a problem.
Kurt, you had something?
I was just going to say, if people are going to clean fish on the dock or on a table, so removing 1, 2, narrows the exposure. Does that make any sense? Because then you get everybody at 1 or 2 tables, which then concentrates, where all the sea lions are going to come. It's a huge problem. I can see that for sure. And it's not just from the sports fishing group either. I see a lot of guys baiting up in the harbor with sea lions, just kind of circling behind the boats, waiting for anything that gets thrown overboard. If they're filleting salmon, they throw their heads over. You know what I mean? There's just a big problem there. So I don't know if you want to remove 2 or 3 or just put them all back in, spread them out, then try to figure this problem out. I don't know.
talk about the signage that we've had in the harbor that Officer Cook has provided. It's just against the law, you'll get a fine. And just last week, my son and I are taking one of our skiff out of the water, and he's waiting for me to back the trailer down, and somebody down unloading, I don't know who it was, dressing a fish at the end of the pier at the loading ramp, was complaining about the sea lions. And on the other hand, they're throwing their guts up in the air to see if they can make the sea lion jump out of the water and catch it. So do you give shot collars to all the people to go out if they don't obey the rules or something? I mean, how do you do it? You have someone sitting there the whole time. It is very complicated, an issue, and there is some liability that's involved in it too.
The idea of getting rid of the chutes and signing it to haul out your waste would be a start.
Yeah, I mean, it is a start, and then, hopefully, no dumping in the dumpsters. And
then, Glo, you can figure out an equitable fee schedule to pay for this.
How about TSA?
So is there any formal direction that Assembly wants to take on this now, or wait till after the Harbor Board meets and maybe they'll brainstorm some ideas between now and then, and
that'd be good.
Harbor staff could possibly block off the chutes, and who supplies the buckets, and who knows. So.
But it is crab season, Mr. Mayor, it is crab season coming up now too, so we could encourage the day skiff fishermen, to come by and get fresh bait, also. A lot of times they do that.
Heads and
heads and stuff. I know in some of these smaller communities, people supply the the garbage cans, for lodge owners to fill it up so that they have fresh bait to take out. So maybe it may not be as big an issue if we tell them that, it can be recycled, put back through the food chain, kind of a thing. So.
Another idea to ponder, Glo. Any more discussion on this issue?
So yay on the yay or nay on tables, put them all back, leave
We're
the two I have
back
up?
to the committee.
Harbor
Glo,
Board.
to your Harbor Board.
Okay.
In the interim, how many?
We have 12 days until the Harbor Board meeting.
How many stations are still in the harbor after you removed?
2.
2. At the loading ramp and the end of the north finger in the middle harbor? So have you noticed, how long has that been? 5-6 days since you've done that?
Yeah. We did it on Friday. We put one back in. I never did take the middle harbor one out.
So what's happened since you've removed them and there's just 2? Are people using only those 2 sites?
Yes. I mean, as far as I know. Maybe John is here, and he has a lot of clients that, are going to be hit hard with this because they're the skiff guys, and he probably hears it before I hear it.
Do you have any input, John? Yeah. I figured you were here for a reason.
I'm not here for this reason. My name's John Jensen. I represent the Petersburg Boat Runners Association. I'm the only one. It's not a formal organization. But anyway, it's going to affect the locals and probably the boat runners the most. I encourage the boat runners to take their fish to one of the local processors. I tell them they come down and pick them up, and they do it that way. They take their guts and gills out in the water and have them do the processing that way.
Similar to what the charter boats do.
Yeah, and I think Stan's idea of having buckets in there, it's probably not going to work, but, it encourage people to take their waste, either back out and dump it in the salt water somewhere out away from the docks. That's probably the most logical thing that's going to happen. Like Stan, he goes out every day, so he can take it with him, and if you're there waiting to haul your boat out, you can just go out in the strong current and dump your waste and come back to the harbor. That's the simplest solution. But it'd probably affect me and the local, just the regular, sport fishermen the most, because it's just really convenient. But on the other hand, it's got a serious problem too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does the Assembly think it's necessary to try to form some kind of a formal committee to address this, to come up with ideas? It sounds like between Stan and the Fish and Game, and they're all communicating with Glo, so we're getting the dialogue from the community I think we need. But I don't know what other people.
I would just suggest the harbor board work with the folks that are in the audience and others that are interested and try to come up with their best solution. If they have to bring it back to us for action, they can certainly do that.
Okay, thank you, Kurt.
Because it gets on this Thursday's agenda, so,
Oh, okay.
yeah, for the harbor board, so.
Yeah, it's the 12th,
Oh,
not
it's on the
Thursday. Thursday, the work session.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So I guess we'll have to leave it at the discretion of the harbor master at this point and the manager, and hopefully we have no issues.
I've asked Chloe to watch it pretty close. I mean, if we see this guy getting even more aggressive, we may have to yank the other two out to keep people safe. You know, it's just, we're going to have to, we're trying to walk a pretty thin line, trying to have it convenient for folks here in town without yanking everything out, but at the same time, we can't get somebody hurt either, so.
Well, I think Stan's point that yanking it out may make it worse. People
May.
are down their hands and knees cleaning them on the dock, and that leads for a slippery dock too, among other problems.
I mean, and, you know, or even, you know, as Kurt said, I mean, limiting it to just a few narrows the problem at just a few. So, you know, we'll try this for a while. We'll keep a real close eye on it. If it gets worse, then we got to step back and think of another interim solution.
Kurt?
This is a question for Steve. So Steve, basically, this is just a liability issue then? Who's responsible in case the sea lions attack somebody that's on the...
I mean, I you know, and that's always, John's the attorney. We may or may not be liable, especially if we have signs out. But
Failure to police generally does not lead to liability.
Okay.
That's a general rule of law. I mean, if we abolish the police department tomorrow, you don't get to sue the borough.
Right.
Okay, you get to recall us all, but not sue us.
but I am worried about somebody getting hurt, and
Yeah, of course.
whether or not it's our fault. It's
Yeah.
just trying to limit that.
Yeah.
So Jared, your new policy is, I guess, to ask one more question, if you throw something overboard and you see them eating it, the sea lion, meaning they're feeding it, and they could get cited?
Yeah.
Okay. Any more discussion on this complicated issue? Okay, that brings us to assembly discussion items, and under that item, it's recognitions. This agenda item is reserved to acknowledge individuals, groups, departments, agencies, or anyone for their contributions toward the betterment of the Petersburg community. Any recognitions at this time?
I would like to.
Oh, go ahead.
Donnie?
Oh, yeah, there was one meeting that I missed since Mayfest, and so I haven't had a chance to publicly thank both Darby Mattingly and then also our own Power and Light department. For the last couple of years, we've always had problems during Mayfest and also the 4th of July with the food tent and power issues. There were just lots and lots of issues, and we were constantly having to bring Darby down there to help fix those during the activities. And it was completely unsafe what was happening at the time. And so Darby spent hours and lots of his own money to donate towards this. Public or Power and Light put in a lot of time to fix the issue this year. It was the first year that we haven't had a single complaint. We hadn't had a single breaker pop or anything during Mayfest, and so I just want to thank them for putting the time and effort into making sure that this was a safe Mayfest, and also a thank you to everybody else that made Mayfest absolutely fantastic.
Okay, thanks. Sheila, did you have?
Yes. Sheila Bell, Director of Mountain View Manor. I would like to acknowledge Bree Hayes. She was the administrator, well, she was hired as an RN in 2005 at Mountain View Manor, and then in November of 2007, she was the administrator there until I took over in August of 2010. So I worked with her for 5 years up at the manor, and she passed away yesterday at the young age of 36 with a long battle of cancer. I watched her battle cancer twice. She would come in the door and just be very, very sick, going through treatment and everything, and she never complained really at all. She had a pretty good attitude. She leaves behind her husband and 2 sons, her mom, her dad, and her sister, and I just would like to express the manor's deepest condolences to her family.
Okay, thank you, Sheila. Sue, did you have?
That was it.
Okay. Sandy?
On that set note, Kevin Cavisto passed away on Saturday. Very unexpected. He joined the fire department in 2009, January, and he was an EMT too while serving with us. He will be sadly missed, not only for his family, but the community as well. So his condolences and thoughts and prayers with his family.
Yeah, very unfortunate. So, I guess to both of those families, you are in our thoughts. So, any more recognitions?
I have one, a happy one, to Cindy Lagodakis. I thought that she took on a great topic there with trying to unite Kate Kupernoff from Petersburg, and it was an excellent meeting, and I look forward to more positive results, and thank you, Cindy.
Thank you.
Good job, Cindy. Any other recognitions? Okay, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor?
We're out of tears.
Aye.